there's enough time with the 4 weeks when you get it. Plus doing the other units like L6M3 revision gives you more info that you can use because it all fits in, doesn't it? Okay, that screen should be sharing with you now. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just for revising. It was just for the leadership one. I used to do this in the management. I've penciled some notes in here on learning outcome 1, what I think the key theories are. Now, there isn't always a theory. Sometimes it's just, it is what it is. But under strategy, I've put Mintzberg's 5 Ps, which we're going to look at in a minute. The study guide shows you the Boston matrix and the McKinsey matrix. Under risk, I've put the 4 Ts, tolerate, treat, all that. And 2 new models, but you only need one of them that help you understand areas of risk. I think the Manu and Mensa one is in the study guide and the Christopher and Peck isn't, but you only need one of them. Competitive advantage, of course, you need Porter, but the study guide shows Hill as well, and Hill's got a quite different view of competitive advantage. There's the old value chain. Offshoring, as Claire knows, the matrix has changed from Carter's to Barnes, and it's different. So you must get your head around that Barnes matrix, even though it was examined in July by the look. Core competencies, and there is some theory from Liam Meisner about KPIs on outsourcing, and that's new. Quality, TQM, PDCA, etc. And then we're struggling for theory. We've got minimum standards. I've got ILO, ETI, SA 8000, slavery, fraud, corruption, governance, kitchen sink. The important one, which is very difficult, as you'll all probably realise, strategic alignment, which we're going to look at the SAM model again tonight, which is in the study guide under 1.4. The study guide shows you the 7S model under 4.4, but you could use it instead of SAM. And you could use Gatona as well, which I'll come on to. So you don't necessarily need all 3, but the SAM one is named in the, not named, it's in the study guide. Relationship management, you discuss interdependence, relationships, supply development, CPFR, VMI, etc. Now, you might be able to add to that. I just quickly went through the full SIPS study guide and my notes, and those were the sort of key things. So I would tend to be doing it like that. I've done it for learning outcome 2 as well, and there's less of it. As you can see, I won't read all those. But you can see Gatona comes again, Ansoff, channel design, there's one. Location, Yang and Lee, not Yin and Yang. Womack and Jones, cannibalization. That would work for me. Little notes on key theories like that, just to sort of focus my mind on what I was going to talk about, I think. So I don't know if that's any use, but that was sort of a very high level sort of view of what we might do. So for tonight, I thought we might look at learning outcome 1, this one, and learning outcome 2, if that's okay. And maybe do 3 and 4 on Sunday. What's anyone's thoughts on that?
Fine by me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and obviously I'll try not to do it in minutiae detail. If you just shout and stop on the stuff we aren't too sure on, maybe. So if I stop sharing that and do a new share, which should be this one, share.
Dave, can you send that document through an email this evening? Because then I can get it printed out tomorrow at work so that I can get it over the weekend. And
the Word document?
Yeah, this what you're sharing now with the little notes
Yeah, and the PowerPoints are you don't, so I'll send all them through. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers.
So slideshow from current slide. So to be honest, l6m3, a lot of the early stuff you've done before on l6m2 strategic management. Your screen share is paused. Okay, how do I stop pausing it? There it goes. There it goes. Is that showing on yours now?
No, I've still got the like the bullet point headlines.
Okay, let me stop sharing. I'll close that because it's said, to be fair. There we go. Share screen. Come on, Dave, concentrate. There we go. How about that?
Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah.
got- yeah, great. Okay, so to be honest, learning outcome 1 isn't too bad. It's just the 2.4 bit's got a bit of rhubarb on the strategic alignment, which we'll look at in depth. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this screen to move, and we'll be in business. There we go. Yeah. So we've briefly looked at the content already. So difference between strategy levels, that's quite easy. What is strategic supply chain management? External analysis, steepled, and strategic relationships. The recommended books, I'm not going to go through that, but I do have a PDF of the Shopper and Mendrel one there. If anyone really wanted at this late stage to do any extra reading, the others aren't any good. So if you wanted the third book there, I can send you that. Okay, exam-wise, you can see what's come up and what might come up, and we'll come back on to that. So learning 1.1, there's nothing really new here that we haven't studied before. Levels of strategy. So what is strategy? Yeah, learn a definition. Mintzberg 5 Ps are always useful because it helps you understand strategy is not just a plan. It could be a ploy, a pattern, a position, a perspective. So they're the 5 Ps, just easy theory. The study guide goes a bit silly and talks about structures of organisations, MNCs, TNCs, national, horizontal, vertical and matrix. So companies are structured differently and they follow different strategies. There's no one right strategy. And the old argument in the strategy books used to be, does strategy follow structure? Well, on prescriptive strategy, it would. But if your strategy is emerging, then it may be influenced by your culture and structure. So it's quite a complex question that they shouldn't ask you that. Levels of strategy, then we've done the 3 levels before, and the operational function is where purchasing is, and purchasing's got to support the business strategy, which supports the corporate strategy. So we've got the usual corporate, business, functional strategy, different levels, so you need to be clear on those. It's been asked. Slight variation there. Supply chain strategy supporting the business strategy, which supports the corporate strategy. And there's a definition there of supply chain strategy. And yet another diagram showing supply chain strategies, not simply a derivative of business strategy, but it might actually deliver value. So it might not just support, it might drive strategy, and it might give you a source of competitive advantage. The study guide throws in the Boston Consulting Matrix for some reason, but we've done that many times, and it's the old cash cow ones. It's something you would do when you're doing your strategic positioning, looking at your portfolio as to whether you should buy, develop new products, get rid of products. The study guide shows the McKinsey matrix, which is a more complex version of the Boston. I can't see it being asked, and I don't like the model, but it gives you a different axis So it's slightly different decision based on the position versus the attractiveness of the industry. We did that, I'm sure, on l6m2. Companies might be very diversified or not very diversified. Competitive advantage, and obviously the key to competitive advantage is there are only two ways, cost and differentiation, but there are 4 generic strategies. And we've done this many times, so be very, very clear. Don't be scared to throw Porter in. 5 forces, value chain, generic strategies, etc. SWOT analysis is mentioned in the study guide. How does SCM impact performance? Well, if you're managing the supply chain properly, hopefully you won't run out of stock. You've got good flow of materials, good information improvement, responsiveness, and the study guide shows responsiveness, reliability, agility, cost. Generic stuff. It obviously impacts profitability. If you do it properly, supply chain management. Eliminates waste. Risk, we need to identify it, assess the impact and probability, and then implement a strategy, tolerate, treat, transfer, terminate. Sources of risk, the study guide shows this one here, external sources and internal sources, and there's obviously 4 of each. So you can learn that list, or perhaps an easier one is the one I like is the Christopher and Peck one, which isn't in the study guide, and it shows 5 areas of risk. Within your company, up your supply chain and down your supply chain, and of course the external environment steepled. And it's an easy diagram to remember, and it means you can talk about each of those. You could do the Manutian Mensa one, which has demand, supply, operational risk, and other risks such as currency. And I think that's in the study guide. But you don't need that one, and that one. You would just need to be able to articulate one of those if you got something on that. You might need disaster planning. How does supply chain management reduce risk? It's self-explanatory, but go through the slide, make sure you're clear that you could say what the benefits would be of strategic supply chain management. And then we're on to 1.2, again, old hat stuff, competitive advantage, a new one, EPO, outsourcing, offshoring and quality. The study guide talks about comparative advantage and that specialisation leads to benefits. Now that's a theory of international trade. It's not a theory of why businesses are transnational or multinational. So it really isn't relevant to the supply chain management, other than some countries are better at producing some type of goods than others. And that's explained partly by Porter's diamond, which isn't in the study guide. So that slide is not particularly useful, I don't think. We've done the 4 generic strategies. 5 forces, again, would be used as part of looking at opportunities, threats and risks, and what strategy to adapt, because it would be based on your analysis of the external environment. Competitive advantage by Hill, not the old Benny Hill, but the operations management guy, being more efficient, better quality, responsivity and innovation. So that's new. It's not been any of the other study guides, but it's only a variation on the theme. Possibly worth learning. How do you reduce price and cost? Well, we manage the linkages, we coordinate, we support, we reduce waste, so we can do value chain analysis. And we might get cost advantage in the supply chain. which could come from setup costs, having the lowest price anyway, etc. Improving quality. Better communication might help. Increased customer expectations and reputational risk are all challenges, and it gives you a quality risk that relates to each of the challenges. No new theory, and it's fairly generic again. Time to markets can give you competitive advantage. How would you speed that up? ESI, joint planning, sharing information, transparency, partnership, you name it, rapid prototyping. Right, and then we've got enterprise profit optimization, which is a marketing concept. It's not procurement, so why it's here, I don't know. And it recognises with 5 types of resources: capital, procurement options, sales opportunities, production capabilities, and information. And by optimising some of that and changing the mix, we can try to make more profit. So we optimise prices, maybe stimulate demand, called placing orders in the study guide, optimise fulfillment, re-optimising prices. So it's, for my mind, it's about dynamic pricing based on what's happening in the market. So you adjust your prices to make the most profits, depending on the demand that's out there. But it can cause, so it can give you benefits. Changes in demand can be reflected in the price of goods. Changing prices quickly can be a good approach. If you've got excess supply or production, you can quickly be capitalised on by changing prices. But it can lead to people holding back purchases, people being dissatisfied because they haven't got the same price as other people. Generally pretty awful. I really don't like it. The old case study, I don't know if it was the level 5 one or level 6 that you haven't done on a big housing company. They said they used profit optimization on their sites. Basically, they changed the mix of what type of houses on a building site and the pricing based on market conditions. So they profit optimized by doing it that way. Right. Outsourcing. Why do we do it? Standard drivers there. And that's Lee and Meisner. And Asia, Lee and Meisner stuff. So they came up with factors impacted upon quality of outsourcing. Reliability, tangibles, conformance. And you'll see this is very similar to RATER, the ServQual, because this is problems with service quality in outsourcing. So they've used some of the RATER, reliability, tangibles, responsiveness, and they've added a couple of others. So it's a way of looking at factors impacting on quality when you outsource services. And that's in the study guide. So that is new. It's a bit complex. So that's the description of each. And then this is the new matrix. You should have, I think you've possibly just missed the study guides with it being in. Can anyone remember this? I'm sure you were all brought up on the Carter's outsourcing matrix. And these axes are different, can you see? Carter had, I think, core importance versus capability. So this has got different axes, and it's got the 4 options of either keep it in-house, get rid of it, outsource it, or jump into bed with someone because you need it, but it's doesn't actually contribute that much to performance. So an example I saw, don't know if I've got it on here.
Hi Dave, it's Dan. Sorry I'm late.
Who's just come in there?
Dan.
Hi Dan, you all right? So we're just literally covering the new outsourcing matrix, which is you to many of the SIPS study guides on this 2018 syllabus?
Yeah. Strangely enough, I got to this point yesterday in my revision, so I've timed it well.
That's good. So they've got rid of the Carter's outsourcing matrix, although you could still use it. And they have asked outsourcing recently, so you need to be familiar with the Barnes model. They call it reduced dependency in the study guide, but the actual Barnes model says eliminate. Then they talk about offshoring, low-cost sourcing, TQM, reactive approaches to quality inspection and QC, building quality in, proactive, QA, SPC, TQM, QFD, Taguchi, SPC, Plan, Do, Check, Act, maybe, Kaizen, you name it. The study guide has a fairly generic couple of pages, no detail. And this is new in the study guide, the 110-100 rule, which is trying to show prevention is less costly than correction, which is less costly than failure. So prevention costs 1, correction costs 10, and if it fails, it costs you $100. Not really a theory, but it's quoted in several textbooks, the 110-100 rule. How do we improve the supply chain? Evaluate it, assess performance, select partners, core competencies, review. It's a very strange model, that. It's not Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's almost something you'd go through when you're doing partnership sourcing or supply development. So you'd look at how people are actually doing. You might look at selecting new partners. You'd look at what they're capable of. So that's there in the guide. And you'd select KPIs such as quality delivery. Maybe use the traffic lights. Then the old steepled appears, which I'm not going to spend any time on, other than to say it's external analysis. Change can be disruptive or incremental. And obviously the big bang change is associated, say, with business process re-engineering, and incremental is associated with Plan, Do, Check, Act. So 2 types of change, needs different type of leadership. And we did that in l6m2. Markets can be volatile. Globalization impacts on us, and there's nothing new on that slide. International standards. Right, this is one of my slides, this, as opposed to the study guide, which I didn't think answered it very well at all. It's, in fact, there's a page in the study guide and it's just waffle. Assess risks of achieving expected international minimum standards. It doesn't mean anything. What do we mean by international minimum standards? Well, my reading of that is C1.1 for risk management, but labour codes, such as ILO, ETI base code, SA 8000, environmental legislation, slavery, fraud, corruption, bribery, behaviour, ethical behaviour. But this whole learning outcome is vague. Other standards, quality management standards, health and safety standards, they aren't strictly international. Well-known standards, ISO 14000, ISO 26000, don't learn them all, but make sure you can cite a few. Trade agreements, yeah, Brexit, ASEAN, NAFTA, APEC. Now, there are benefits of using international standards when we're trading with other countries, because it means they can't say we won't buy your goods, because if they're to an international standard, they have to have them. They can't say they must conform to French standard this. So there are some benefits of having these standards, as you'll see with the Brexit talks, on food safety standards and other standards. So they do help international trade do standards. Now we're on to 1.4. and the strategic alignment rhubarb, which is interesting to say the least. Right, so Steve's losing his notes page. There we go. So, what have we got here? We've got what is strategic alignment? Well, what is it indeed? The study guide shows that, which is from corporate strategy, you get business strategy, functional, and it's got to be aligned. And you've got your supply chain strategy showing down there. So that model's okay. Why do we need to align? Strategically, reduce waste, get rid of conflict, more stability. Why doesn't it always align? Culture, structures, complexity, personal issues. They're the 4 factors from the study guide. Culture, capability, effect, alignment. Customer relationship management is an important tool for helping align relationships. And supplier relationship management helps align the supply chain. Right, now we're on to the interesting thing. The study guide shows SAM, the strategic alignment model. And the strategic alignment model from Henderson and Oldak shows strategic fit versus functional integration. And there's a rather stupid diagram here that says if that's aligned and that's aligned, then it's highly effective. Well, it would be if they're both aligned. And if you get anything else, it's misaligned. That doesn't really help you. All right, the true model then is there. There are 4 quadrants, 4 boxes. And there's 2 dimensions, strategic fit, which is this here, and functional fit, which is this way. So you've got horizontal and vertical alignment in this model. And if I can just look at my notes here, all the components working together determine the extent of alignment. At least as important are the linkages between the quadrants, which are these things here and here and here. So it's all these linkages. The first linkage is strategic fit. This is the vertical linkage that refers to the strategy to determine the infrastructure. The second linkage is the functional structure and is related to the alignment of the business and IT. But it was originally developed to look at your IT infrastructure and your IT strategy. But if you swap that for supply chain, your supply chain has got to be functionally integrated in your business, and the supply chain strategy has got to integrate with the business strategy. So it's a model widely taught, but not in supply chains. It's just one in textbooks on general alignment. I really don't like it, but it's there in the study guide. There's a couple of good videos on the linkages on that. So that's SAM, but you could use, and that's the same model, you could probably use the 7S model, which we discuss in more detail in chapter 4, which was from Peters and Waterman, from McKinsey. And this shows that everything's got to be aligned and how everything relates to each other, the 7 S's, structure, strategy. So this is a model for helping us understand whether, so if we change the strategy, we've got to maybe change lots of other things to make sure everything's aligned. If we've got problems, it could be that some things aren't aligned and that we need to change things. So I prefer the 7S model. It's very good, but the study guide's gone down SAM. How do we implement relationship management? Develop a model, design engagement, governance, storyboard and development of communication, yuck. Training, KPIs, business case. And then there's a model there, not in the study guide from Gartner, that I've put into how you implement relationship management. Design, align, launch, govern. Quite like that model. You could cite it from Gartner if you like that model, but don't go and learn that and everything else. Okay, that's pretty much chapter 1 at a great speed of knots. Any questions on that before I put 2 on? I can go back to the model. Let me go to 2, share. Any big things on that? Quite broad, isn't it? Anyone got any questions? Deadly silence. Okay, let's check if everyone's got this showing. Let's just check. Okay, we're on to chapter 2, and again we'll just cover the key points. How do we segment supply chains? How do we segment customers? That is the examiner's favourite question from the old syllabus and even from the new one, because it's so easy to examine. How do you segment customers? How do you design a supply chain for different customers? How do we develop networks, distribution, and the other favourite, lean versus agile. So it's got 2 of the most heavily examined areas on there, which are okay. The bit in the middle is a bit horrible. So if we look at segmentation, customer mix and strategies. What is a segment? Well, if you read any marketing book, it should be distinct, sizable and actionable, else it's not really any use as a segment. And you need to decide whether you're going to sell the same product to everyone, undifferentiated marketing, whether you're going to have differentiated marketing and have a different marketing mix for each segment. And the marketing mix, can you remember what that was, Claire? Anyone who can tell me what the marketing mix is? What's the marketing mix, anyone?
Don't
Is it
ask
the
me
4
stupid
Ps?
questions this time, Annette.
Yeah, 4 Ps. Who said that?
Lucy, hello.
Hello, Lucy. Yeah,
Hi,
well
Lucy.
done. Yes, it's product, price, promotion, place. So you might be selling the same product to all the segments and just packaging it different, maybe different price, different marketing, or it could be a different product. So it is the product, price, promotion, place. And the other thing you could do, you could just sell to one segment, like OAPs or children or whatever. You could just aim at one market, and that's concentrated. So that everyone gets segmentation, I think, for consumers. You can do it by geographic, demographic, psychographic, or behavioural. Pretty standard, and the videos are superb on YouTube on these segmentation methods. We can segment by maybe whether on IT, do they want an innovative solution, a proven one, a cost-effective one, or are they price seekers? Supply chain segmentation. Well, we can do it by volume, value, profitability, complexity, risk. Kraljek matrix, other words, Pareto. We could do it by number of purchases, volume of purchases, etc. So there are 3 or 4 ways of segmenting supply chains. And then that's a slide from the old syllabus there that gives you a few, and I'm sure I've put some couple of notes in mine. There's Pareto, and we've got Kraljek and the supply positioning matrix, which is the supply preferencing, nuisance, core, all that stuff. And there's the Kraljek matrix. That's the original Kraljek, and that's the study guide one. Can you see there's a subtle difference? The original matrix, don't learn it, was that. The study guide goes down profit impact versus supply risk. Occasionally they call that routine, the bottom left, but usually it's non-critical. So Kraljek's important. You might classify the products as commodity strategic standard key, which is a variation on Kraljek, and that's from Bueller or Bueller. Okay, what's this mean? Well, we might do it on customer behavior, which links to PADI, and we'll come on to this PADI in a second. We can tier the supply chain. I'm not sure about the 4 gaps. This is the like SurfQual, where you can get difference between what you thought you were getting, what you did get, what the customer wants, and that's can be a problem. Mismatch. This is the Fisher matrix, which looks at, is your product functional, i.e. boring routine, or is it more of an innovative high-tech product? Now, if you've got a boring functional product, you can have an efficient lean supply chain. If you've got an innovative requirement that's changing, technology's changing, then you need a responsive supply chain, and that's a match. Common sense, but can you see there's some axes there that show what makes something functional? It's predictive, it's low variety, price stable, long lead time, etc. So that is a more complex version of that, which is the Fisher matrix. Functional product versus innovative product. Do you have an efficient supply chain or responsive? So again, this links to segmenting your supply chain. By, is it functional? The product, is it innovative? And what strategy do you use? Do you go for efficiency or response? So the Fisher one is not too bad to learn. There's a key slide telling you the difference between functional and innovative. Of course, some products are in between. Some are neither one nor the other, but it's just a useful analogy, I think, that gives you something to write about. There's a Christopher and Tower matrix in the study guide, which is taking it too far because there's 8 options there. You've got volatile and stable demand, the product's special or standard, but the lead time can be long or short. So you would need 8 different strategies. Right, this is ultra important. Gatorna, who developed the PADI framework, which is in section 3, said you need to segment your customers based on their buying behaviours, which can be collaborative, innovative, efficient, or dynamic. And there's the expansion of that collaborative, transactional, dynamic. Now, this is a useful segmentation model because once you've segmented your customer, you can match your supply chain to the customer segment. And Gatorna very famously said, one size doesn't fit all. You need to tailor your supply chain to the customer segment, which is pretty common sense. So Gatorna theory can be used in segmentation because they're for buying behaviours. I think that's not too bad. They're throwing the Ansoff matrix as well in the study guide. So when you're looking at your product mix or where you're going, you think, well, shall we try and sell more of what we're doing? Shall we try and develop a new product for the existing market? New products or new products, new markets. So this is part of them managing the product mix. And they're the strategies that link to that slide. Them 3 all link to the top left quadrant there. And the others link to the other 3. So Ansoff's pretty straightforward. They aren't going to ask you about Ansoff. It's just would be a small part of an answer at best. They throw the Boston matrix in again for good measure. And there's the Boston matrix, which we all understand we need a cow to send money to question marks and to send money to stars, but we can't feed everyone. And eventually stars will turn into cash cows and dogs or problem child will get rid of. Product life cycle is important. The marketing mix we've mentioned. And that was pretty much 2.1. 2.2 gets a bit mumbo jumbo in its tiering, optimization, networks, reverse logistics, flows in supply chain, nothing new. Value stream mapping is important to supply chains if we're trying to understand where there's waste, trying to streamline it, we're trying to manage it, we're trying to improve it. We need to understand it, identify risk, you name it. Network sourcing is developed from the Japanese, and just it's about having just a few suppliers or even just tier 1 suppliers. And there's tiering, tier 1, tier 2, and there might even be tier 3. So that's fairly straightforward. Value chains thrown in again. Network optimization modeling. Sorry, I'll go to the second slide. Supply chain optimization trade-offs, competing costs such as warehousing, transport, to identify the optimal configuration. This takes into service lead times, supply and demand. The key, my word in here, is to model the entire supply chain from raw materials to finished products. And we can use fancy statistical methods, linear programming or simulation software to work out. We put all the numbers in, push the button, and it will optimize and come up with solutions. So we could try to minimize costs, maximize profits at the minimum service level, and it will tell us maybe how many distribution centers we need, what stocking levels we need, etc., etc. It's quite a complex process. So describe all the activities, select the mix, minimize costs, vary estimates. And there's a 4-stage process there. I think my notes have a slight variation on that, to be fair. Not an easy concept in none. Factors that influence network design, but you can't ignore customer response time. Transport costs and logistics and warehouse costs are important. And some of you did the logistics module, and you can see their logistics costs are the minimum, and that depends on the inventory cost transport. So there is an optimum level between the number of facilities and logistics costs. Something I saw on the internet today was software to add to your ERP. All the big boys do it. Supply chain optimization software. This plugs into ERPs, giving you inventory forecast planning and ordering, calculates reorder points. Doesn't tell you how many locations you need. It's trying to optimize a given supply chain. Whereas I think the NOM here is actually starting from scratch and saying, how would we design it? Where would we have warehouses? How many? Whereas this add-on to ERP is, okay, we've got these warehouses, we've got the supply chain, stick in the forecast, etc. costs, and it will do that. Network optimizations can be gravity location models, and they can help identify locations in a region. And there's another diagram of a NOM with the graphs that go down and up, and the optimum is somewhere in here. You can't draw graphs, I don't think. The study guide shows this. Develop your strategy, use scenario modeling, implement. You might prefer that, but there isn't a set way to do NOM. That's the study guide one, and I think I've got variations on that. The key word though is optimization. The study guide says the members of a NOM model will be raw materials, suppliers and linkages, including costs and capacities, and transport capacity will be put in. You'll put that into the model, and you'll put all that in. And then hopefully you'll get the right answers. Then it briefly discusses reverse logistics, does the study guide, because obviously that's supply chain management. The the study guide says there are considerations when we use reverse logistics. Very strange section, page 124, about it depends on profitability, strategic choice, control, power, quality, customer experience. Well, it's almost whether you're going to bother doing reverse logistics, where you've got to do it in most industries now because of closed loop recycling. Certainly customers expect that. But the study guide's got a rather outdated view of considerations there. Strategies for different tiers. Well, the study guide mentions processes can be monitored, managed, etc. And that's taken from a diagram from the license book here, which is a tiered supply chain. This is managed because you're managing your tier 1 directly. Monitored are the dotted lines. Not managed are these back here. And non-members are the others. So when you think of a tiered supply chain, it can mean, it helps you understand how processes are linked. They can be managed, monitored, not managed, or non-member, which is this diagram. A bit complex. And we can get the quality gaps. Sorry, got the same diagram there. Distribution, channel design. Well, Chopra and Mendel talk about setting your strategy, then looking at configuration, looking at your sites and picking your locations. The study guide doesn't really use that particularly. So distribution can be direct through intermediaries such as wholesalers, retailers. So it can be B2C, it can be B2B, various distribution channels. There's the same sort of diagram, direct or through intermediaries, agents, wholesalers, retailers. Rosenblum, which is one of the theories I've named, talk about a 7-step process for channel design. Surprisingly, it says recognise the need, set objectives, specify the tasks, develop different structures, evaluate, choose the best, select. Not rocket science, not easy to learn though. E-commerce, what would we consider on e-commerce? I've got this word here we'll come on to in a minute, but some general factors there, nothing new. How do we design logistics flows? Well, we could have, it could be based on offering different service levels to different needs of different customer segments. It could be based on the division of products into portfolios. Or it could be the optimization of the number and location of plants based on decisions on inventory. So the decision on logistics product flow could be based around any of them 3 factors. How do we develop logistics flow? Pattern, collect the data on all the costs, capacities, aggregate the data, use optimization, modeling, implement. Well, for my mind, that's just none from earlier. And the study guide has got it under developing a logistics design, which is none. Physical networks. Again, that hub and spoke is shown in the diagram. Number of plants, number of locations. Distribution centres can be used for breaking bulk or consolidating deliveries. So be very clear you can understand that role. And that's very important if you use transport companies. Are they going to consolidate, break bulk? Distribution centres could be consolidating, which was A, taking all the deliveries from here, putting together and shipping to A, or they could be breaking bulk. Challenges in transport, rather silly, shortage of drivers, fuel prices, I think you could make that up on the day. Challenges, same one. transport management, challenges, pretty generic, dirgy stuff. Location of distribution centres depends on product service mix, service levels, balancing demand supply. There's a million factors, and we do come back onto that in chapter 4. But they're general issues, and that's a study guide diagram because it's in blue. Positioning local, global, regional, international, mouthful. The study guide simply shows you this. So if you only want to learn that from Gautana, it depends on political, legal drivers, physical infrastructures, industry developments and trends, and business cultures. Whereas the old study guide had Ugoland's matrix in, which talked about whether you'd have a regional, global or local supply chain and how integrated it was. And it's not in the study guide, that model. So if you don't want to learn that, just stick with the Gautana stuff. And that's the local, regional or global. And then we're on to what I call the easy stuff, which I know Dan and everyone will like because it's their day job, isn't it? So lean and agile and a little bit of demand forecasting. So make sure you know what lean thinking is. Make sure you can cite this list of specifying value, determine the system by doing this, like lining value, creating flow, pulling materials, continuous improving. So don't just learn Tim Wood. Make sure you can cite that, or this one, which is a 5-step model for implementing lean. It's the same thing, just a slightly different explanation. But very important. Benefits of lean, self-explanatory. Waste, Tim Wood. Obviously, who are you going to cite? You aren't going to cite Tim Wood. What's the name of the person you're going to cite to get you more marks? Who developed the concept of the 7 wastes?
Oh no.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah, very good. Taishi Ono. Yeah. Ono will do. Yes. That's good. And you're going to get marks at level 6 for citing people. So try and throw in a name if you can, but please don't throw in Tim Wood. If you want extra marks as well, you might say often people add an 8th waste, which is people, not using their talent and expertise to the maximum. How do we achieve agility? Pretty self-explanatory that we need to react, we need to have more capacity, and a really good revision slide, the difference between lean and agile. And we've got these innovative and functional products again. Can you see? So lean's good for functional products, agile's good for innovative fashion products. And some examples, similar on this slide, a slight variation, agile, lean. So them 2 slides, really good for revision. I'm just banging in, yes, I could get all that. Lean versus agile, well, it depends on, is your supply stable or volatile, and is the demand stable? If the demand is stable and supply is stable, we can have lean. If it isn't, we might need agile, or we might need a combination. We might need legal. That's probably one from the study guide. Can you see that's supply versus demand? Another way to look at it is lead time versus demand. You end up with the same diagram, but you can have slightly difference on axes. Push-pull. Push is your MRP. Pull is your JIT or lean. How do we match supply up with demand? Well, if we could make stuff as fast as it was demanded, that would be it. That would be JIT. We wouldn't need stock. We wouldn't have any problems, but we can't. So we need to plan and forecast. We need to get better demand planning accuracy. So that's the word, sorry, that I mentioned earlier, was cannibalization that affects demand. Bringing forward future sales of the promoted product to the customer buys now, it can lower demand for substitute or competing products, and it can lead to high demand for complementary. So when we're planning and forecasting, we need to be careful of promotions because they can lead to cannibalization that impacts other products. Good word to throw in. So other causal events can impact on demand and supply, competitor activity. We need perhaps better statistical forecasting. We need to manage promotions, and we need to reduce variability, NISG. So how do we improve accuracy? The study guide suggests we clean the data, that we use appropriate categories and dimensions, and that the technical platform used is able to do statistical methods, else it wouldn't be much use, would it? So that's 3 from the study guide, and then they talk about pilot, integrate, and identify. And if I could just drop out for a second there, and that's from Chase. There, explore the use of statistical techniques, establish a methodology, and that identify the event. So that's a strange one from the study guide. We could use technology to communicate. Now in section 2, they talk about these methods of system integration from Blair and Gooser. I think they fit better in section 4, where it talks about integrating communications and data. But basically we can have very tightly coupled systems, or we can have loosely coupled systems. And there's this technology SOA, SOI, and ESB. And obviously we can use RFID and other things to help improve communication. It's in the guide, I can't really see a technical question being asked, but obviously interfacing and exchanging information and how tightly you are integrated is a key issue in supply chains. RFID benefits, we've done that many times. Any questions? Covered a lot quickly there, but there's a lot of general stuff, isn't there, in there? Stop share.